We are honored to have two distinguished professionals chairing this session, Dr. Deepak Yadav and Ms. Prabha Dawadi. Dr. Deepak Yadav, MSORL, HNSTUTHIOM and Fellowship in Surgical Head and Neck Oncology from Tata Memorial Center, Mumbai, is an Associate Professor at Patna Academy of Health Sciences, where he has been serving since 2011. He is also a visiting consultant at Kathmandu's Cancer Center. With specialized training in head and neck surgical oncology, Dr. Yadav is deeply dedicated to advancing excellence in patient care, teaching and research in otolaryngology and oncology. And welcoming our another chair, Ms. Prabha Dawadi, an assistant professor in the Department of ENT HNS at Maharajganj Medical Campus, Tribhuvan University Teaching Hospital, Kathmandu, Nepal. She currently serves as the president of Speech and Hearing Association of Nepal and is the leader of the IDTSI Nepal Reference Group. Her clinical and research interests include dysphagia management, auditory verbal therapy, and voice disorder, making her an ideal chairperson for today's symposium. We warmly welcome our chairs, Dr. Deepak Yadav and Ms. Prabha Dawadi, and request them to kindly take their seats on the stage to chair this session.
Sarah Orkut-Rigsby is a speech language pathologist and international board certified lactation consultant with nearly 2 decades of clinical experience across US and Nepal. She currently serves as rehabilitation coordinator and lead SLP at INF Green Pasture Hospital in Pokhara. Her professional interest includes swallowing, feeding disorders, neonatal and NICU care, and rehabilitation service development in low-resource setting. Sarah has previously worked at United Mission Hospital in Tanzania and various healthcare facilities in the United States. She holds advanced certification in modified variant swallow, impairment scale, NICU feeding, and fiber optic endoscopic evaluation for swallowing.
So thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to speak at Shan and to be with all of you. This way. There we go. So kind of our objectives for today, we'll talk about the historic overview of dysphagia care. We'll talk about emerging trends, advantages to the patients of holistic care, and some practical approaches as well. And I do want to acknowledge the work of George Barnes, CCC SLP, who has really collated a lot of information about dysphagia care on his blog and on his Instagram. So I want to acknowledge that some of this information is collated by him. So just a brief history. Dysphagia therapy, from the 1970s, speech pathologists became involved in this care through the work of George Larson and Jerry Logeman. And in 1983, Dr. Logeman published The Cookie Swallow, where she used barium cookies under fluoroscopy, and that was later transformed into our modified barium swallow study that we all know about and have seen and have heard about even today. The first issue of the Medical Journal of Dysphagia was published in 1984, and currently, the most recent numbers I could find, 59% of the SLPs in India report to giving dysphagia care, 65% in the United States. But when you look at, in the US, the speech therapists that work with in a healthcare setting, that number goes to 91%. So dysphagia is very much part of our field, and it's a part of our field that I believe is here to stay, and I think that we're going to continue to be needed in our dysphagia care. I was so happy yesterday when I saw in a lot of the presentations us talking about the ICF model, because that's the model that we use at my hospital that I work at, Green Pastures Hospital. We're always talking about multidisciplinary care and the ICF. And the ICF framework, which is the International Classification of Functioning and Disability by the WHO, has different pillars for everything. And it's just a framework to think about the whole patient and what we do. So for dysphagia care, the ICF pillars list nutrition and hydration, decreasing risk of aspiration-related illnesses. Notice that doesn't say decreased risk of aspiration. It says aspiration-related illnesses. That's going to be an important point later. decreased choking risk, and decreased psychosocial effects such as social isolation or depressions in persons with dysphagia. And I think some of those research papers we saw this morning really focus on that social isolation and the feelings of the patient through the questionnaires after their dysphagia. So some of our just traditional things that we do, and in the U.S. we have an expression called "don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." There might be one in Nepali, but I don't know it. But it means traditional doesn't mean bad. Traditional is still very useful, and so we're going to continue to use these things because they are evidence-based, they are proven. But maybe we need to use them in a different way. So traditionally, clinical bedside swallow evaluations, that's our first step. When we first see a patient, we've got to assess that patient and see what the patient's able to do. Modified barium swallow studies are available in a few places in Kathmandu. I don't know of anywhere else in Nepal that they're being done right now, but please come tell me if you do know, because I'm always interested. By flexible endoscopic evaluation of swallowing. Again, we're doing it in a few places in Nepal. We do it at Green Pastures Hospital, and I know a few of our people in Kathmandu also do. If you know of other places, please let me know. We do a lot of diet modifications. The IDDSI has a lot of proof to help with timing, control sensation, as well as reduce penetration and aspiration when we modify someone's textures and diets. Exercises, we've got a lot of proof that these work as well. And compensatory strategies. Again, we've got proof that all of these things are helpful with people with dysphagia. But what if we're so focused on the aspiration that we miss the rest of the picture? I was trying to practice to say it in Nepali, but I didn't get my brain around it. But you might miss the forest for the trees. If we only look at the details, we might miss the whole picture of the person. If I only focus on the aspiration that might happen, or the one time I hear a cough, and I don't let the person eat forever, maybe I've missed the whole bigger picture. Maybe the patient has COPD with a dry cough, and their cough is not related to their aspiration. So what if we're missing the big picture by just thinking aspiration? And then what about the quality of life? What about the nutrition and the hydration? So what if we think in a holistic way? What if we apply a different lens to our dysphagia care? And that's what I'm going to hopefully talk with you guys about today a little bit more. So the top predictors for aspiration pneumonia, very funny, it's not aspiration. So aspiration is not the top predictor for aspiration pneumonia. And I know that makes us think, what are we doing? That's crazy. So when we do swallow studies and you see people aspirating objectively in a FEES or a modified barium, we see aspiration, but the biggest predictor are these two things: dependency for feeding and oral care. Because development of aspiration pneumonia is multifactorial. Everyone aspirates, we think, at least 3 to 4 times a day. But most of us are active, we're upright, we have a good cough response, we have good pulmonary toileting, we have good lung clearance, and we have good oral care if we're all here. I hope we have good oral care if we're talking to each other. And so our little bit of aspiration probably does not affect our lungs and turn into an aspiration pneumonia. But if a patient has other factors, that small bit of aspiration, of course, can turn into something bigger. But dependency for feeding and oral care, and those are some of the easiest things that we forget about as SLPs. So oral care, and if you've talked to me ever, you know that I love to talk about oral care. It's my favorite thing. Given a talk at the Physiotherapy Association about why physiotherapists should be doing oral care also, because I think it's everybody's responsibility to do oral care. So we can make oral care complicated. We can make oral care have lots of assessments and tools and grading of oral care, and those aren't bad. But let me summarize all of these results, and you can see how many patients. There's, let's see, 910 in this one, a couple thousand something. But over 75 studies, the best method to prevent pneumonia is through toothbrushing. So we don't need this fancy chlorhexidine, we don't need the iodine, we don't need the saline rinses, we don't need the swabs, we need a toothbrush. And this is for patients who are ventilated, this is for patients who are NPO, these are patients with the feeding tubes, these are patients with trachs. we need to brush their teeth because mechanical plaque removal, which is toothbrushing, is the most effective way. Of course, we may need to use suctioning, we may need to use a low amount of water to help prevent aspiration as much as we can, but toothbrushing and mechanical removal is going to be your best thing. And this is one of the easiest things we can teach a family, right? So, oops, went the wrong way. This is one of our patients who arrived to us with one of her teeth tied in place by another hospital. And they saved her life, and they put her in a trach and she was alive, but her oral care was previously bad from her previous life, and then it was still bad. So collaborate in your oral care. The first day you meet a patient, oral care should be the first thing you do. Teach the family how to clean their patient's mouth. We're a rehabilitation hospital. We're not an acute center yet. And so most of our patients arrive from another facility. And when, there are patients who've had craniotomies, who have tracheostomies, who have major strokes. And one of the first questions I always ask is, have you been brushing their teeth? And they say, oh, no. They've been in the hospital for a month and we haven't brushed their teeth. And so one of the first things we teach is oral care because we know that that's going to help them a lot. So it engages the patients in self-care, makes you feel better. I don't know about you, but if I forget to brush my teeth in the morning, I feel kind of yucky. I don't really want to talk to people. I'm embarrassed. And it doesn't make me be awake. So find a person who's your oral care champion. For us, it's our speech therapy assistant who is a staff nurse. And her job is for every new patient, she goes and teaches them a beautiful way to brush people's teeth. If you don't have a wonderful Parvati sister the way we do, please find someone else, or maybe it's you. Maybe you're at the point in your career that you're the oral care champion, and that's okay, and that's great, but find someone who can teach that skill to your patients. So if you don't remember anything else, before you do anything else swallowing, before you do a feast, before you think about complicated interventions, brush the people's teeth. Just clean their mouth, and that'll really help a lot of things. Next up is nasogastric tubes. So one of the things, I've been in Nepal for 12 years. I practiced in the US for about 10 years before that. And one of the things I've seen growing in Nepal is our use of nasogastric tubes, which I think is great because we're keeping people alive with more severe illnesses than when I first arrived here. So when to place, what to give, and when to remove. So often it's not our decision. Often it's made by neurosurgeons or other doctors or the team at another hospital. So we see patients who've arrived with an NG tube. But sometimes we do see patients who need it. Maybe they're not alert. Maybe they're in a coma state. Maybe they have overt signs of aspiration, and so they cannot comfortably eat and drink. And sometimes we recommend the NG tube. We had a patient 2 weeks ago that before the festival, the NG was taken out so they could come to our hospital, they thought, and we put the NG back in the next day, and we just were able to help the gentleman get it out 2 weeks, or I think this week actually. I'm looking at DP because it was her patient. Patients may have poor breath and swallow coordination and high oxygen needs, which will make eating unsafe. So maybe someone with a COPD exacerbation will need to have an NG tube in for longer until their pulmonary status is more resolved. And that's okay. Short-term use is great. But NG tubes do come with risk, and I think that we need to remember that also. Especially in Nepal, we use primarily in our situation outside of Kathmandu, we use homemade tube feeding. So people are blending dal bhat takari and lito and sattu and all the things and blending and putting into the tube. And those can get stuck, so we use quite a large bore NG tube. We usually use a 14 gauge, which keeps the cricopharyngeus open quite a lot, which means that we have a higher risk of gastroesophageal reflux. And we see that over and over with our long-term NG pipe patients. So we see patients who maybe their swallow is looking okay, but then they're refluxing so much, and we see a lot of laryngeal damage from that. So keep that in mind too. An NG tube is not without risk. So what to give via the NG tube? In the US, in my practice, I never had to think about this because I had a registered dietitian who wrote and prescribed the tube feeding formula and calculated the calories and the macros and the micros, and I didn't have to think about it at all. And then I came to Nepal, and we didn't have very many registered dietitians, and also there was no pre-mixed tube feeding. And that's great because what's happening in the West now is people are going back to these homemade tube feeding formulas because it's better for the patients to use real food. So I think it's great that we started in the place that lots of people in other countries are going back to now. So what we've done at Green Pastures is we realized that we had a gap because patients were coming to us from other hospitals with malnourishment, with bed sores, and they were, their hyponatremia was very bad because they weren't being educated well on what to eat. And so working with our registered dietitian, our peer counselor, and our staff nurse, speech therapy assistant, we thought about what locally available ingredients were there. How could we use things that you could get easily and cheaply in our setting in Pokhara that we could help the family blend to make into tube feedings? And we've come up with a recipe. We've been using it for about a year. We're getting it validated and checked from a nutritional standpoint in Australia now. But from that, we're seeing patients improve because we're feeding them the right things. And so through our multidisciplinary care and through our dietitian training, 2 of our therapy assistants to be able to teach families about this, we're seeing nutrition improve also. When to remove the NG tube, this is also really important. So I can usually get really excited and just say, pull the NG tubes, let's get them out. But then sometimes we see a huge plummet in the patient's nutritional status if they're not quite ready. So a recent study, it was in 2021, showed that a patient's energy intake, so their calorie intake, plummeted from 97% to 65% in a single day after NG tube removal. So we need to be careful when we remove the NG tubes. We need to think about doing graduated, decreasing tube feedings, increasing oral feedings. Maybe it takes, usually at our hospital, it takes about 3 to 5 days for us to fully wean someone off of an NG tube once we've deemed that their swallow is safe, as we slowly decrease and slowly increase. And then don't forget about medication administration. Sometimes as speech therapists, we get so focused on the textures and the swallowing of food items that we forget about that they need to be able to have medication as well. So we've had a patient recently with a pretty severe brain injury, and he was chewing all of his medicine, but then he didn't like the way it tasted because it was gross, and so he was spitting it out, so he wasn't getting the medication he needed. So he could swallow and eat his food well, but we needed to work on getting him to take his pills whole so that he didn't have to have an NG tube for that. So think about the whole picture for the patient. Yep. And then, so think about what to feed, how the medicine is administered, and the oral take before removal. And then think about if you need to transition to a PEG tube. I've always been, in the US, the main length of use of an NG tube is 8 weeks before you transition to a PEG tube. Here in Nepal, it's much longer. I haven't been able to see much data, but we just took out on Thursday an NG tube of a patient who had it for 9 months at our center, and that's not an uncommon thing, at least, in our context, but I haven't seen any data yet. But people are keeping NG tubes here for a long time. Now, thankfully, we're getting more and more services with our GI doctors who can place PEG tubes well. And so helping the family to think about that, because we've had some of our patients' families who thanked us afterwards and come afterwards and say, thank you for helping us with that, because now he's doing much better because he doesn't have this tube in his nose, he's not uncomfortable. So think about transitioning to PEG tubes as well. So now we'll get into thickened liquids, which I know we all have loved thickened liquids. When I first started 20 years ago at the hospital that I worked in the US, we got a little bag that we carried that had all of our different kinds of thickened liquids in it, so we could test every patient and go around and do it, and we had all these pre-mixed ones. But then I came to Nepal, and we didn't have thickened liquids easily available, and we could get some commercially, and then we also were trying to do naturally thickened liquids, and we were trying lots of different things. But something that's interesting to me is in 2021 and in 2023, so pretty recent studies, we're seeing that there's not much evidence right now that thickened liquids can prevent dysphagia, related clinical complications, and that there are adverse effects to thickened liquids. So what used to be our gold standard treatment for dysphagia is changing some. So some of the not great things that we hear in some patient reports are that thickened liquids are unpleasant and that most people dislike them. You know, the other thing I've kind of touched on is that sometimes access to thickened liquids is difficult. I know a few years ago we could get commercial thickener here, and then we had a period where we couldn't, and then now we rely sometimes on family members to bring it from other countries. So we're using locally available, naturally thickened liquids. You know, we're thinking about things that are a different texture that we can use here. And then something else that's from a 2025 study is that patients in thickened liquids are at higher risk of dehydration because of the decreased bioavailability of water. Sorry, not because of that, but because of less intake. So thickened liquids generally patients don't like and they don't comply with. They have their place though. We have one lady who's in our community program who her family brings in thickened liquids from the UK because she feels better when she drinks thickened liquids. She has Parkinson's disease and she doesn't cough when she's in thickened liquids. And so for her, that's what she's very happy with. She enjoys it because she feels pleasure when she eats. And that's a holistic approach, right? She's enjoying it. Why would we not give her what she wants? And after acute illness and when the respiratory system needs to heal, thickened liquids are a fantastic choice to help bridge that gap between NG tube feeding and oral feeding. So I think they're great for certain people, and I think they're great for short-term use in most cases. The other strategy that we can use that I think we don't often give enough time or attention to is to how do we decrease the feeding dependence. Because that was one of the two factors, right, of the biggest predictors of aspiration pneumonia. Feeding dependence and, what was it? Somebody remembers. Oral care. Yes, oral care. Okay, I remember too. So, self-feeding increases the cognitive input. So this is a procedural memory. Hand to mouth, drinking water. This is procedural memory. This is low in the brain. So if we can give the patient back these things, versus me coming and shoving a spoon in their face, the patient's going to be more compliant. And we're all going to be surprised at what skill they actually have left. It can increase the sensation. So if I'm only feeding you and you never feel the anterior spillage, because I don't let you feel it, because I'm feeding you really nicely, then you're never going to have any awareness that you need to try to do more lip rounding. My kids would love this cat because, like, my family loves cats, and now there's a cat walking, so maybe my kids did it for good luck for me. And I think working with physiotherapists and occupational therapists, which I know not every center has, but helping think about positioning, thinking about adaptive equipment that may be needed, thinking about adaptive placement and positioning for feeding so the patient has more success with self-feeding can be a game changer. So what we do is we follow a sake sama, which means as much as you can model in our practice. So from day one, I'm holding the cup with the patient and we're bringing to the mouth if we can. The patient and I are working together to hold the biscuit so we can bring it to our mouth. We're telling the family members they can't feed the patient anymore. We said the patient, as much as they can, has to start with a few bites on their own. And then if they get tired, they're not able to self-feed, of course we take over because we want to love them well. But we really, really educate our family to decrease the feeding dependence. And we do that through good positioning, making sure they have the right, in our physio and occupational therapy team and P&O team, make sure they have the right wheelchair and the right positioning and the right bracing that they need to be able to be successful with ED. Thinking about compensatory strategies. Again, this is one of those traditional methods that I talked about at the beginning, I think everyone in the world has heard about a chin tuck, right? Take a sip, tuck your chin, you can swallow. And that's great. It does work with some people. So don't throw away these strategies. When you're doing objective measures like fees, this is a great time to check your objective measures. So try them under objective measures so you can see if your strategy does work. Try it without an objective measure if you don't have it. And think about why different measures might work with certain people. If you have someone with really poor bolus transit and a really weak swallow, maybe they need to alternate bites and sips because maybe they don't have that bolus propulsion. So think about the why of the strategies before you do them. And then also think about cognition. cognition and compliance. So we are working with a lady last week, and she had a COPD exacerbation, so she needed to do a breath hold swallow because her breathing and swallowing weren't coordinated. And she also had a right hemisphere stroke and didn't have great memory and new learning ability. So she and I worked for about a week on how do you swallow. You take a breath, put it in your mouth, you swallow, you breathe out. And we did that over and over again until my throat actually was hurting for like 2 days afterwards because I did so many breath hold swallows with her. And it took us about a week so she could do the strategy and get her NG tube out. So think about compliance and think about teachability with your strategies. And then exercises. Again, sometimes I think we jump right to compensation, which does have a place, and we forget about we can strengthen muscles. And a lot of this comes from our physiotherapy and occupational therapy colleagues, that exercise helps things. And we all know this in our life, right? If I want my arms to be stronger, what do I have to do? Some kind of exercise, right? I have to lift something heavy or I have to do push-ups. So my arms aren't going to just get stronger because I want them to. That's the same with our muscles here that may be damaged from a stroke. So we've got some exercises that have great bodies of evidence, like expiratory muscle strength trainers, chin tuck against resistance, effortful swallows, Shakir, Masakos. These all have evidence to prove that they help. We have some other things we do that don't have a lot of evidence. Doesn't mean that they're maybe not effective for certain patients, but these should be our go-tos. These should be the things we think of first because we have a body of evidence to know that they work. But just with my example, if I every day do one push-up, am I going to get nice muscles from my one push-up a day? No, don't we all wish, right? The same with swallowing. If you don't have a big enough intensity and repetition of your exercises, they're not going to help anything. So doing with you 5 times, the Masako 5 times in therapy, and you did great, that's not going to make much of an influence. So you've got to teach the caregiver and the patient the importance of exercises. At our center, we start with the CTAR. We buy the little Pachas rupee, 50 rupee ball that are soft and air-filled, the little football-looking ones, and we use those. And we tuck it here, and we do chin tuck against resistance. And we tell the family to help the patient do that, sets of 10, 5 times, I'm not saying it right, 10 times, 10 repetitions, 5 times throughout the day, so that they get at least 300 to 500 repetitions of this simple exercise that helps with high laryngeal elevation. You've got to get the reps in to make it count. So in conclusion, take a step back from aspiration. And I always tell my speech therapists who I train doing fees and scoping, I say, anybody can see aspiration. Anybody can pass a scope. I can teach anyone to pass a scope, and I can teach anyone to see aspiration. But I can't teach everybody to say why the aspiration happened and what you need to do to help it. So take a step back from aspiration and think about the whole person as you're making decisions for dysphagia management. Use the team and the resources around you. Sit with, if you have friends who are physios, if you have registered dietitians, if you have occupational therapists, if you have nurses, if you have a grandma that you can ask, hey, what are some locally available high-calorie things? I had a patient's wife who was teaching me about sattu the other day because I didn't know what it was, and she told me what was in it, and it sounded great. So think about using the locally available knowledge to you to help think, wow, we can help these patients. And then our outcomes and our impact will be greater if we focus on the patient. So just don't forget those things as you're doing your dysphagia care. Here's all the references. Thank you guys so much.
Enlightening us with a holistic approach from, dysphagia is not just about aspiration, and to the oral care and thickened liquids, very interesting, and also some compensatory strategies. We definitely have few questions, but there is a symposium going on in the hall A. We'd like to request everyone to join for the symposium for now, and we'll have a question and answer session in the next part of the symposium. Is that okay?
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, let's proceed to the hall A.
So there are more traditional and conventional methods, but sometimes, what if you get, an additional tool that increases or augments the, outcomes of your therapy? Okay, whatever that you do with so much of rigorous commitment and sheer dedication, you plan, you do the therapy. But what if you can add a little bit more to it that enhances the outcome of that therapy? That is what we are going to talk about. In fact, neuromodulation, the term itself says that you are trying to do something in terms of stimulating the neuronal regions. Okay? So how are we going to do it? There are different ways of doing it. So yesterday we did understand that what is post-stroke, aphasia or post-stroke. I will also be talking a little bit on dysphagia because not the traditional techniques what Madam Sarah was speaking about a little while ago, but in addition to it. So we have different management options for whether it is language disorders or whether it is dysphagia management. Okay, but what are we trying to do there? We are trying to directly target the impairments. Okay, but here we are trying to add on to something more. What are we trying to add on? See, when we do traditional therapy techniques, there is a long and intensive training that has to go through. Okay, and moreover, it is inconsistent and variable because the therapy outcome compared to one patient to the another is going to change. It's not going to be on the same level. Also, one approach may not be suitable for all types of disorders or all types of symptoms. And moreover, the neuroplasticity, if you can still retain or augment this neuroplasticity, the outcome can be much more better. So, what are the perspectives in India? Recently, Goswami sir and one of his PhD candidates has published this very good article which gives us an idea. In India, we are seeing that around 72% of the people are familiar regarding neuromodulation and other things because this in the recent times, a lot of people are talking about it. 91% did mention that there is a limited knowledge regarding the procedural and the instrumental methods, how it is done, why it has to be done, how we can handle this. People would have heard the terminology, but how do we really put it into use? You see, only 4.4% of them had hands-on training. I was one of the lucky 4.4% people who had a training from a physiotherapist who uses this for motor, physiotherapy or motor related issues in Manipur. So 80% of the clinicians have perceived in their study that it works well as an augmentative method. That means it adds on to the strength of the traditional therapy or traditional therapy outcomes. And lastly, they have found out that 40-60% of them see that there is a greater improvement when it is combined with conventional therapy. Now these are very important points. One, people have heard about it. Two, not many people know how to use it or how we can access it. Three, it does provide some amount of evidence that we can use it as an adjunctive method. That means adding on to your conventional therapy technique. So today's talk, I am going to try to tell you from my experience how a gold standard equipment and the equipments that are available at lesser cost easily can be worked with. Because gold standard equipment gives you standardized way of protocol and how you proceed with it. But unfortunately, they are very expensive. Like easily it crosses 10 lakhs. Not many clinicians would be able to access it. But if you have something which is in a few thousand of rupees, but you need to be a little bit more careful, and if you understand the principle behind it, you can use it in the same way as you do. That is where my area of work comes, because I don't usually work with the gold standard equipment. I work with the traditional equipment because whichever hospital that I have been there, physiotherapists are there and physiotherapists are already having this. We need to understand the principle of how it works. So what is neuromodulation? There are multiple ways of stimulating the brain region. Okay, we are trying to stimulate the brain, not the nerve cell in specific, but we are trying to stimulate the larger space or the larger areas of the interest that we are looking into. So TMS stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. TDCS stands for transcranial direct current stimulation. There is also something called as transcranial alternating current stimulation also. Okay, but we will be focusing more on TDCS because this is quite affordable and easily available in most of the countries these days. So what is this TDCS, transcranial direct current stimulation? It is a simple device, okay, run by a 9-volt battery which is DC, that is direct current, not an alternating current. So it has single phases of current coming there, and there are two electrodes basically, a positive and a negative electrode. So basic physics, people know current flows from which direction? Positive, negative, negative to positive. So The red one, that is the positive electrode, is called an anode, whereas the negative one, blue, that is called as a cathode. Okay? Now I will come back to this anode and cathode. So positive charge, anode, negative charge, cathode. So when I am stimulating the brain, see what it does is it creates a diffused electrical network across the cerebral hemisphere or the region of interest that we are trying to talk about. So if I keep a positive electrode on the right hemisphere, the left hemisphere, and if I keep a negative, that is the cathode, on the right hemisphere, you see that the current flows in this direction. So whichever regions that come in this area are going to get stimulated, but there is a difference. The ones which are closer to the cathode will have an excitatory effect. Okay, whereas the one which is near the cathodal region will have an inhibitory effect. That means if you want to excite a certain region of the brain, you can use anodal stimulation. If you want to stimulate or inhibit certain function, you will have to use a cathodal stimulation. Okay, and you have a device that will help you set many things. So as I told you, there is a anodal stimulation, okay, and the cathodal stimulation, and you can use it based on your requirement. That is, certain times I might have to not excite the region. See, for example, what happens, a person has undergone ischemic changes. Left hemisphere, take for example the Broca's area. So now we need to stimulate the Broca's region, but that area is already damaged, but the perilesional areas are still healthy. So this will stimulate not only that region of the Broca's area, but also the perilesional areas. Why? Because the electrodes are not small, they are wide. Okay, they are like 3.5 centimeter square patches that you place on the region. So it will stimulate a wider area, that is the perilesional areas that are there. But yesterday I was talking to you about MIT. Correct. What do we do in MIT? We are using the left hand to stimulate so that the right hemisphere, which is healthy, the homologous regions, take over the function and then help you in the initiation of the verbal output. Correct? But if you keep on doing this for a long time, I was telling you, you have to subside. If you keep on doing this for a long time, the route becomes so longer that the latency of word retrieval increases. That means the person will take more time to retrieve the same word. So the right hemisphere unnecessarily starts to come into picture. There is something called as transcallosal disinhibition. That means the right hemisphere otherwise is keeping quite distant. It does have language networks coming through the right hemisphere as well. If you look at the Gregory-Hickok model, not only is the left hemisphere involved for language functioning, the right hemisphere also has some roots going through, but it is inhibited because of the left hemisphere dominance. Now the left hemisphere has gone into stroke. The right hemisphere is now released. So the transcallosal disinhibition, it has made the right hemisphere come into picture now, and it is unnecessarily interfering in your therapy outcomes. So now that is where you need to put a negative electrode and stimulate so that the right hemisphere starts to subside. Put a positive electrode on the left hemisphere so that the perilesional areas can grow, give you therapy. This is the idea behind it, and there are many people who have been working on this line. You can see there are a huge number of data set that is available. You can look into one of the Cochrane reviews that was published in 2019 in order to get more information on that. So as I told you, see, look here, you have a patch electrode, okay? Okay, you don't have pinpoint electrode, you are not putting a needle electrode there, you are putting a patch electrode. So it is a larger area that you are stimulating. So probably the Broca's area, if I look at this 1020 classification, okay, this is how we use in our 32 channel caps. You have seen multi-channel, this one, AEP recordings. It is similar to that. So if I expect it, it should be somewhere. So this is the vertex, okay. I have to measure from Nazion to Inion and then calculate the CZ. From here, different calculations are available for us to reach different areas. So our area somewhere on F7 is our region of interest, whereas physiotherapists are more focused on the F3 because of the motor strength. Okay, so now we want to stimulate F7, homologous region, F8. Why? Because this is where our language areas are. But if I am working on a dysarthric patient, I will be more focused in region F3 and F7 together. So I will place my electrode a little bit more vertical rather than a horizontal because I want the motor areas to also get stimulated. But there is another experiment that I can do. I don't want the right hemisphere to get inhibited. I don't want to, interfere with the right hemisphere at all. Let it be whatever it is. Let us do naturally. So what I can do is, I'll place the positive electrode here. Negative, I'll keep it in a neutral level. That is the supraorbital region. Okay. So the network still goes there, but it is not at all touching the homologous region, which is my area of interest that need not be touched. So I'll go back to the slide. See here. So this is an instrument which has the controls. I'll come back to this. 2 electrodes. There is a head strap or headband. This, I'm not promoting any product here to put it on record, but Soterix is one of the most commonly seen tool in most of the standard clinics. So you can call it as monopoly or you can call it as gold standard, it's up to you. But this is the one which is most commonly being used. So I'll keep this as an example, but I'm not at all promoting this product. So as I said, you can identify the regions of interest, and especially here, if you see, if you focus on the regions of interest, that is F3 and F7, you will be able to solve not only language areas but also dysphagia related aspects also. So you are automatically stimulating these regions based on your selection. Okay. Now coming on to this. Don't worry about this blue device for a while. We'll just focus on this. It says 1 into 1. 1 into 1 is 2 electrodes. Okay. Positive, negative. But there is 4 into 1 also. This is called high definition TDCS. High definition means not only 2 points, I can stimulate multiple points at the same time. I'll come back to that. Before we go to that, let us understand this. See, now what are the controls, basic controls that you need in a TDCS? You need a timer, you need a current level that is in milliamperes. So this current is safe enough not to cause any aversions to most of the people, especially for those who have epilepsy, history of epilepsy. It is a contraindicated. You should not use this without clearance from the neurologist. Okay, this is their own technology that says whether the contacts are placed well or not. Just like how you do for the EGG, you use an EGG, you also have 2 electrodes there. Similarly, when you place the electrodes, whether the contact is working fine or not. Now let us see this. Okay, the switch on, then the intensity, there is what amount of current you are going to give. Okay, how much duration you are going to give, and you start. This is for immediately stopping it. Now intensity, if you see, there is 1, 2, 3 and 5. That means 1 milliampere, 2 milliampere, 3 milliampere and 5 milliampere of the controls, but you can give in between also. There are some experiments that give 1.5 milliamperes, 2.5. 5 is not used in speech and language disorders so far. I have seen it mostly in physiotherapy based articles. So our region is 1, 1.5, maximum 2. That is what most of the studies have used. 1 and 1.5 being the most commonly used electrical level. And the duration is 20 to 30 minutes, most commonly utilized for speech language. This one. What is this sham? Sham is, a placebo method, you can say. You set up everything, you switch on. After 30 seconds, it will automatically switch off, but everything will look that as though the stimulation is happening. So why they do this is to find out whether really this instrument is using or usable, or it is just that the person feels that I am being stimulated and the outcome is coming. So the sham mode is basically for research and we don't use it in clinical. But otherwise, you understood? You set up the electrodes, you place the headband, you have set the current level, you have set the timer, you switch it on and relax. There is something called as ramp up period. A ramp up is, you have set 2 milliamperes, okay? It will suddenly not start at 2 milliamperes. It will start slowly and then rise up to that level so that, okay, there is no, sudden stimulation happening there. So the stimulation slowly builds on, okay, over a period of time that takes maximum or 20 seconds to reach, the 2 milliampere this one, and then it will stay continuously stimulating for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, 35 seconds. Similarly here, I will take one electrode as the ground and the rest will be taken as the stimulation device. So for example, I can keep at multiple points and only one point as, ground and then use it. So this I have already explained. Yeah, so these are the parameters that you should remember. Basically, if you want to work with TDCS, you should know this. What is the region of interest that you are going to work with? What do you want to stimulate? Positively, what do you want to stimulate? Negatively, or what you do not want to stimulate? Next, what is the duration? Commonly used 10 to 20 minutes, some have gone up to 30 also. Current type, are you going to use a direct current or an alternating current? Then comes the strength. 1 to 2 milliamperes have been most optimal, as I said, for speech language pathology cases. And how many channels are you using? Minimum 2 you have to use, and then multiple can happen. Ramp up and ramp down, 30 seconds is optimal. If you do not do ramp ups, there are high chances that the person will experience flashes. Flashes in the sense that he will start feeling that the lights are flickering, his vision can get distorted, or even epilepsy can get triggered if you don't do the proper ramp up. See, this is how you place the multiple electrodes. You will get a cap. Based on that cap, you can choose where or which areas I want to stimulate. This is more, I would say, narrowed down region of interest, not a patch, but more specific. So I can choose one ground and multiple stimulation areas, or I can choose any one as ground and then I can choose the multiple regions for. This is called high definition TDCS. 4 into 1. Okay, but there are other devices which have 32 channels already placed, and then it can stimulate. I think it is a New Zealand based product that we had seen in my. See, so you will start getting the picture how you have stimulated, which are the areas that you have taken into region of interest, and how you are stimulating. So there is a software that comes with it. Apart from this, there is a personal device also where you provide all the programs, up to 100 programs. The patient keeps it on, switches on, and just takes the session. You will get the report afterwards, how the session report has gone. So this is the personal stimulator. Now, this was something which is so-called gold standard, but as I said, it's not easily available every time. This is what we get commonly. Now there were so many controls, there were so many things happening. See, all those things are missing here. These are the most common, available in India. And I have worked with at least, three of them. These two definitely, yes, I have worked with them, because that is what was available to me while I was working. So now, if you see here, it is just an intensity, and time you have to calculate, ramp up you have to do, You need to make sure that the pads that are used for stimulation are saline soaked pads. That company provides the saline soaked pad. We don't have it. You have to have the pads ready. You need to have the saline ready. You need to, soak it up, then use it. If you do not, if that dries up, there is something called as hot spot that gets created, because it is saline. It gets heated, evaporates, salt gets accumulated, that region starts burning. The patient won't even realize. When you take out the patch, you will see a hole there. It would have burnt into the skin and the fat tissue. So what you have to do? You have to spread the activation in that entire region, take the sponge, soak it again, place it back. Otherwise, there will be burns on the skin. So this you have to do manually. Look at these pads. That's just simple cotton-based pads. So how can we make better pads? People have seen that kitchen wipes, the ones with sponge kitchen wipe. It's the same material. Exactly cut it, 7 centimeters by 5, 3.5 centimeters square region. Sew it up, don't staple it, because the moment you staple it, the metal areas will become hot spots. So it has to be a non-conductive material, and then make your own pads like this. Soak it, use it, throw it. So we had a tough time finding those, because our work was during the lockdown period and nothing was coming and going out of the US. So we did not have those pads, but we had a sponge factory nearby. So we went there with the material, we showed it to the person, he said, sir, this is the same as that. And it worked. And it can be made with just 30 rupees. You can make 10 out of that. So what are the common issues? I was telling you, see, look at the pads. These are the pads that come along with the brand, but unfortunately it doesn't. So how do I know? Try it on yourself. So there was a time that I had the instrument there. I am there, lab is there, Dr. Mayur is there, and nothing else is happening. The whole world is stopped now, but we have to know. So what we did is, we tried it on ourselves. So there was no headband. We created a headband using 1 inch elastic that is easily available in any of the fancy stores. Use the Velcro, use the right amount of tension, place it on ourselves. I told you that flashes, I experienced those flashes. I developed headache for continuously using it without understanding. So when you experiment on yourself, you try understanding that how this device works and what can it really cause. So that way we fiddled with this instrument, and even we took a voltmeter to check whether the output was going correct or not. And to our realization, we saw that the display on this was not giving the right measurement. We had set 1 milliampere, it was giving 4.5 milliamperes. So that is why I was feeling this one. So these are all simple things that come from your physics class. So what did we do? We identified an instrument that has two electrodes, a positive and a negative electrode. It requires sponge pads that are soaked in saline, okay, and the electrodes that go into it and the saline soaked pad have to be wet. When you use it, you identify a region of interest. You have identified why that region of interest has to be either positively stimulated or negatively stimulated. Next, you have identified the time. You have got a clearance from the neurologist saying that this person does not have any possibility of getting an epilepsy or any other contraindication due to TDCS. What else? You don't need all that controls. Now set your intensity slowly to the desired level. Put your time, wait. Let the person relax for 20 minutes. As soon as the stimulation is over, do your conventional therapy. There are other ways of doing it also. While the stimulation happening, then also you can do the therapy. But the best way is stimulate first, prepare the neuronal regions for the oncoming activity, and then do the therapy. Yeah, so what are the benefits? As I said, a little bit of evidence that we get to see. So conventional speech therapy definitely has a good amount of outcomes in aphasia as well as dysphagia, but when you add it along with this, it increases the chances. And simultaneous versus sequential, that's what it is. Simultaneous stimulation and therapy is, while the stimulation is happening, you are giving the therapy. That, and the moment you have given the stimulation, stop and then immediately start therapy, there is no much significant difference. Okay? But after the therapy, if you give a stimulation, no much use at all. So what do we see compared to TDCS and TMS? I'll just put TMS in a very simple way. See, TMS is not like TDCS, which gives a diffuse electrical network. It gives pulses, magnetic pulses. Okay, so there is a device that is focused onto the region of interest, and then it gives pulses. Okay, and they penetrate deeper than the electrical stimulation. So you can actually see immediate responses coming in. If it is focused on the limb region, you can see that there is immediate movement coming in. So it is transient, and the effects are also transient. Whereas TDCS prepares the person or the plasticity in a better level, where because it is creating a diffused network there, and the effects are going to stand for a longer time compared to TMS. But disadvantage is it doesn't penetrate much deeper. It is more for the cortical or the superficial layers, whereas TMS can go a little bit more deeper, because if it is subcortical aphasia, TDCS has not been much appreciated compared to that of magnetic stimulation, because you need to stimulate deeper. So the cost effectiveness is higher. Okay, application is easier in TDCS. Neuroplastic changes in the brain or the cortical structures are better. So there is noted impact not only in speech language pathology, but in visual perception, cognitive functions, especially the psychiatrists use it a lot these days. Motor learning, working memory, episodic and semantic memory, also there is a lot of work that has been showing good improvements. So in a nutshell, if I put all the literature review, positive effects definitely can be seen, moderate evidence is there. That means it is not a magical tool, okay? Don't think that the moment you start using TDCS, tomorrow everything becomes fine. No, it has its own limitations and difficulties, but it does provide a good ray of hope for augmenting or improvising your traditional outputs, okay? So most work has been on monolinguals. We were lucky to have worked in bilingual conditions also in a national project guided by Dr. Gopikrishnan in Manipal University. So even there, we had a good amount of work happening in terms of bilinguals versus monolinguals, and we did see a lot of good improvements in the cases who had used TDCS along with speech therapy, and not only that, it even generalized to non trained languages also. So anodal stimulation are most commonly used, okay, but a few studies also talk about cathedral stimulation, and it's totally dependent upon you what you want to achieve through this stimulation. So in conclusion, there is good and noticeable pre-post evaluation that we have seen. Effects are long-term, maintenance there, but these 2 points I want to highlight, that is, right now there is no standardized protocol that you can say that I have to do it only in this way. Second of all, there is no appropriate training. Okay, so whoever has got an opportunity to work with those who have learned from somebody else is how you are going to do it. But hopefully in the future, we will also come across standardized protocols and appropriate training certifications for doing this. So nobody can call themselves as a certified TDCS user as of today, but with proper training from people who have worked in it will help you understand this instrument even more better. So the future perspectives are, we need more evidence-based approaches because most of them are either case series or case studies over long-term studies that have been done. Standard protocols need to be developed, safety and proper training has to be done, and as of now, adjunct is the way of taking neuromodulation ahead. Don't think that I'll just give stimulation and forget about the outcomes. So it has to be done as a adjunctive method for your traditional. So it cannot replace the traditional methods as well. So thank you very much for the patience with me. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Though it has people have been using in physiotherapy, but the same thing when you use with persons with neurological insult, you have to be very careful. Sometimes wrong activation can create a problem also, because there are cases which I have seen, like when he was talking about cathode as well as anode and all, there can be issues. Specifically, like some of these people who have been doing RTMS,
Yes.
not TDS, but RTMS has issues. But definitely it's an adjunct therapy, it works. We also have found that there are no effects. But in case person has tried to do a good case history, and wherever the patient has got issue, you should abort it. That's more important for this. Otherwise it's safe, it's a non-invasive, it can be used. But any questions for him? Please. That's what we as a speech pathologist should do it also, and should know it also.
In Parkinson's and in dementia also, a lot of studies are happening. You can look into that. So applications of TDCS, you will be able to see that the rate of decline that we see when it comes into Parkinson's cases, they have seen that there is a delay in that. So they can prolong the declining effect. Especially they use it on the vertex so that there is a larger diffuse area. Okay, and they keep the other device, sort of the negative here, so that it makes the entire region of the cerebrum being covered.
So when should we start actually this therapy? After the stroke,
Yeah, it means in the acute or subacute conditions.
Yeah.
So as far as we have seen, we can do it with the neurological clearance even at acute stage. In fact, it prepares for the recovery that is going on. We don't have to wait for the person to come to OPD. So at what settings, this is actually in global aphasia cases and other cases, there is no history of epilepsy. This becomes the first level at which you can start helping the person to initiate the recovery. So we have done it at acute and even on subacute conditions. And once they start recovering and they come back to us in the OPD, they are much better. They're much better because these effects go beyond 30 days or 45 days. So we can start as early as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wasim, for sharing your valuable expertise and perspective on such an important area of clinical practice. And heartfelt thanks to Dr. S.P. Koswami, sir, for chairing this enlightening session. And I would like to request, sir, to hand over the certificate to our guest speaker, Dr. Wasim.
Come out of the washroom for 10 minutes. Please knock and check whether it's breathing in or out. Okay, it is very important. He can say, okay, it's very important, specifically at night and all. The early morning strokes, usually it happens after 4:30. You go to the washroom, someone else has to break the washrooms. It's very common because we don't have two-way latches. That's also privacy, but sometimes as the age advances, we have to make changes in our system. You can put the socks, people can move, okay? As wherever he moves, these sensations can be emotional and social support. There are, like you would have heard about so many apps, like you talk about this Instagram, Facebooks and all like that. In some of the developed countries, they have been talking about brain care notes, okay? Some people will spend time with the family. They'll say, okay, I have time, I will come and spend some 5 hours. I'll spend 10 hours. So, similar to that, you can have this online caregiver support. Some people enjoy spending time with the elderly people, some people enjoy spending time giving their time. So, we call it these volunteers are available. So, in case, if you use these services, like no one is there at home, there are possibilities people can provide services to them. You have brain care notes, okay, or an easy to use app, okay, which can take about your caregivers. Like say for example, now you don't have to type it, you can just say verbally, you can text it, right? So all these things are very important for us to take care. How is their health? Because most of the time, I think in South Asian countries we don't declare what problems we have, right? One, we all don't tell about, we all use this called as polypharmacy, right? You use Ayurvedic also, homeopathy also, go to the Swamijis and all, okay? Saint went, so I always tell them come to Goswami also sometimes, okay? So that is more important for you guys, okay? So there is another thing which we have been talking about, symptoms, okay? They have been talking about this sparrow is nothing but animatronic social robot, okay? They have been talking about, like you have been talking about this animal therapy and all. So they are saying they have made these robotic types of animals like dog, cat and all, because they don't have fur, so there are no health issues, okay? But there are issues with this also, because I am okay with this when you don't have, but most important, your social support should come from man to man, not machine oriented, okay? These are not realistic in that, so you don't get that true emotional vibes. You would have heard about this theory of mind, mirror neurons, that does not get activated, and as a result, the bond what they develop is not a natural bond. It's not a true reflection. But when you don't have anything, you can use it, these services also. Rehabilitation, so I always tell that rehabilitation professionals, when you use technology, use it, there is nothing wrong. But have a good research with some pinch of salt, make sure that these are not adversely affecting. It's not taking that man out of this person. That it is not that technology has become the only thing for today's. So what they said, you can also use different technology based upon the stages of the conditions. Okay? So you can have a stage 1 which is asymptomatic, stage 2 where there is a transitional, stage 2 there is a mild, okay, mild cognitive impairment, then stage 1 there is also a mild, moderate and severe variety. So where you can use all these technologies. So they say increased reliance on technology for independency. So stage 1 is accessing support and information for possible future decline. Okay? So you can use certain things, like you have documented your details, you have told those things, your house is well fitted with the technology. So you have used different apps. So in asymptomatic or stage 1, what you say, person with preclinical AD will have sufficient independence to engage with technology on their own, but may also do so in tandem with care partners. This is when you have a preclinical stage. We have been talking about this, that you should always provide the family that how much of your asset, how much of your bank account, where all your insurances, all details you should have been provided. You should provide it, you should document it. Okay? Every time. So digital technology intervention might focus on warning signs and future planning for both the parties, and person with preclinical AD may also engage with technology as a way. Sometimes you can use again, like you can have friends where you can talk to them, where you can discuss certain things, where you can vent it out. In preclinical phase, you have used the technology. Okay? In stage 2 and 3, during transitional cognitive decline, that is stage 2 and 3, the care partner may place. Initially it was with the person, but stage 2 and 3, the partner will take over. Okay, he will know, he or she will know. Okay, in these stages, technology used may shift towards cognitive offloading and automated tasks. So you can reduce that. Okay, that now on the caregiver also. Mild stage, once functional decline emerges, the patient may increasingly rely on technology to maintain degree of independence. When you wanted to move about, if they can give you directions, like say for example map, right? It can tell you Google Map, you go to the right, you go to the left. All those things are nothing but it can provide you daily. Then care partner are likely to engage in cognitive offloading also because he can do certain things. So there is some sort of less load on the caregiver also. Stage 5 and 6 is in the moderate and severe dementia phase, patient may be at increased risk of health and safety. We are talking about safety. Several times I have seen, I have come across with the families, they will say the patient has bolted from inside and he doesn't know how to open it. Right? It can happen in the washroom, it can happen in the home. So he doesn't know. Or like nowadays you have these houses which we call as duplex houses, right? You would have gone to the first floor. He's there on the first floor and you are in the ground floor. Okay, you are standing outside, he doesn't know how to open the door. Or we have been saying it. There is a medication, he was supposed to take one medicine, he has taken 10. Because he doesn't remember that I have not taken medicine. So there are safety issues also with them. At this point, cognitive partner may primarily implementation of technology with emphasis on turning more towards managing symptoms and monitoring safety. Safety is very important in these individuals. Variability in technology application by clinical syndromes. Individual with amnesia presentation are typical of AD type, and autobiographical memory support tools like hippo cameras can be used. Allow user to take pictures and videos of important life events. You can take it up and then you can play it out. So we call it those episodic memories which are there with them. For patient with primary progressive aphasias, you can use more technology which is something like co-chat. Okay, this is basically to improve their communication because there they have issues with the memories. So these are communication apps. These help person with aphasia retrieve words by selecting from photos with word labels. So you can use it. For patient with neurodegenerative diseases that impact movements, technology to monitor their falls, like Parkinsonism and all those things. Okay, the TED wearable bracelet. These are bracelets which are available, which will say whether how his movements are going to take place. So it can control that. So they may not have a fall fractures because of the fragility also. Technology interpretations, when you looked into, I think almost all of us are using it. Okay, everybody uses technology, right? Anyone who does not use the technology, you can raise your hand. Okay, hope you don't have a Prexy component, right? So you can raise it, right? So we have been using technology, and the technology has entered in our DNA by default, right? So we have to use the technology. So it can start from the MacBook to the Venus. I will just talk about those techniques which we have been using. So what we have been saying is that when you use technology, you use telepractice, it can minimize your barriers. Okay? It can minimize your barriers. It can also cut down the cost, and you can provide services to the places where you cannot reach. And the another point which I have also put it as that it can also be a safety point of view. Okay? Technology is safe. Like a person is there sitting in Pokhara, right? And you are delivering services from Kathmandu, right? That's one thing which you can deliver, that geographical. But sometimes what can happen is, like I know in India there have been some 2-3 cases where a clinician has been charge seated. Okay, he has been behind bar. They have said it that this person has sexually abused him, right? So if you would have done through technology, you are not in physical contact with the person, you would have recorded your session, you are safe. You are also safe and patient is also safe. So safety plays a very important role here also. Sometimes there is a possibility clinician can also misuse, person can misuse, or there may be some third party who will ask you to misuse it. Or there is a physically abused. He said like this, materialistic abused, he charged so much. But when you have taken the payment through online, you have a proof about that. So what we are trying to say is safety. Plus when a person is traveling from home to your clinics, sometimes there can be a road accident. Right? So there is no safety, he might fall. He might met with an accident. You are cutting down the cost of the travel. So safety is there using the technology. So telepractice, it is the one which provides us, and we have been using it, and it's not something great which you can use. You just need a system with good internet connectivity, and almost all laptops and have good camera. So you don't need something great in that. You can use it, and we have been using it and we have been successful. So it can be used for your assessment, it can be used for treatment, it can be used for referral purposes, it can also be used for communicating with other professionals. That's what Asha has also talked about. So one app which, if you have time, you can just download it. This app is the app which we have used it for both cognitive communication disorders. This is what we call as the CT app. It's available in Indian English version also now. They wanted to come out in different languages, but they have not been able to come out. But what happens is, this is basically brain drain to brain gain. They have been using it. That you should use this because there are several activities which you can carry out easily, which it can be either clinician assisted or it can be independent activities also. Okay? So basically, it can have a guided personalized experiences. Okay? It can have automated assessments, AI based, and therapy anytime, anywhere via mobile devices can be given. And it has been reported that when you use this app, a clinician, the person uses 5 times more activities. Okay? 5 times he is using more. Okay? And as a result, his improvement is better, or if not better, the condition will be slowed down. Okay? So it has got more than 500,000 evidence-based therapies along with 91 categories. Clinician can deliver therapies in clinic or a remote. You can assess him, you can track him. It saves both the time with automated documentation and reports. So even you will get the report that okay, what activities he has done, which domain he has done, and where he is doing well, how many days he has been doing the activities. So you get an honest feedback what patient is doing. You have activities starting from speech language exercises, which varies from auditory comprehension, word retrieval, naming, repetition, oral reading, sentence production, talking about everyday, okay, reading comprehension, spelling as well. So you can pick up any activities, okay, based upon how he performs. Cognitive, attention, auditory memory, visual memory, analytical reasoning, quantitative reasonings, arithmetic, as well as visual spatial processing skills. There are several activities out there. Okay, so they have said it that you can see more number, even you can use it. You can see more number of patients, provide world class constant, and it has been proved, it has got a strong evidence. I am not talking about without evidence. Okay, automatically send families, patients progress report that how many activities he is doing it, monitor patient remotely and reduce appointments, and it has got several, in terms of it has got HIPAA compliance also. So it has been reported that there are more than 700,000 users are there. The median patient age is 65 years. 270 million plus exercises are there, and there are several clinicians, and there are good number of publications in this. So it has evidence. Okay. So, and it can be used for different patients. You can use for acquired conditions, you can use for neurodegenerative diseases as well as the developmental disorders. So from 10 years onwards, you can use any of these activities. So these are made. Okay. So they say, I told you 5 times more therapy at home leading to better outcomes. We also done once, so these are the reports which they have done, the randomized studies for both aphasia as well as the dementia patients, and where they have reported, this was for aphasia, that when they used an app, the control group's performance was much better than the people who have not used the app, where you had said, okay, you can carry out any activities. So this is more a structured program. Okay, and same things what happened is, when they used for dementias and all, their amount of activities what they used, and they had a high adherence of the activities. That means the usage was much better. We also tried to use this app, and we have found out that the literacy, and when caregiver support is there, researcher guidance is there, or knows how to use the phone, intervention taken. So we have tried to understand whether impact of literacy, the knowledge of the prior knowledge of the usage of the what we call a smartphone, intervention whether he has taken, or whether it is delivered by the clinicians. So you just tell me whenever it is done. Okay. So what we saw was that when it is guided by therapist, okay. So clinician is a king. When it is guided by a therapist, when clinician guides, clinician controls, monitors and delivers, the compliance is very good. Okay. But when it is not guided by clinician, it has got a poor compliance. Similarly, when we said the compliance is good for young adults, okay, at your age people, okay, and older adults, but it is poor for middle-aged individuals, okay, people like of my age, okay, I'm not that old, okay, so those people have got a poor compliance. I'll tell you the reason for that, okay, because we are the sandwich populations. People who have taken intervention, okay, their compliance is better than people who have not taken compliance. Literacy has got little better compliance, okay, than the illiterates. Caregiver support, when you do it, it has got a better compliance. That means how good the family support and how they are able to do, rather than no caregiver support, okay. And whether he does not know the use of smartphone or knows the use of smartphone, we have said it does not make much a difference. What we have concluded is that good therapy compliance using are that caregiver support and therapy guided by clinicians are good compliance. These are the variables. However, literacy, knowledge are not the prerequisite. So anyone can use it. That's what this study has shown when we used it. So you can download it. It is freely available on both the iOS version as well as on the Android version. So it has got two versions, the clinician version as well as the patient versions. Okay. There are some other things which I think even Dr. Wasim talked about. You can also use technology in terms of TDCS. But when you use TDCS with dementias, it has been reported that it can improve your short-term memory, but not in a long-term memories. Okay? So the impact can be, it can only slow down the pace which we have been using it, and we also have found certain reports. And this is what he has repeated, so I don't want to talk. This is what we have been using about. Okay? This is our versions, and we have been using more with persons with aphasias as well as with dementias, so we have been using less. But aphasias and stuttering we have been using, and there are certain research which is going on with this. Okay? Transcranial magnetic stimulation also can be used, but they can have a side effects. So every patient is not an ideal for TDCS and TMS, this which I am repeating it, because there can be an adverse effect also, until and unless you read and know, okay, whether how many sessions can be given. If you give too much of sessions, like 20-30 sessions, there are patients who have become into dementia mode also. There are patients which I know them. You can also have virtual realities, which we have been talking about. This you should use it in patients which are available, specifically when they wanted to use the washroom. Okay, addressing your spatial as well as visual challenges can be there. You can use it. Uplifting moods. There are certain times which almost can be used in virtual reality. There are things which you can use, and when you use these apps, it has been written that it can reduce stress in their level by 70%. There are apps, but don't get it addicted to that. We also wanted to tell you that this is one thing which we say is group therapies, you can use it. Rather than the individual therapies, you can also, individual also can do, but group therapies also you should promote that. And group therapies should be both for person with dementias as well as the caregivers. Because caregivers also need to vent out there. Okay? So it can improve their communication skills, increases their motivation and reduces their social isolation. See, when you are working in a dementia group, everyone thinks that they are same. Right? So, and sometimes the people who are doing better, they also get motivated, look, my problem is little less than his problems. And they also act as a role model for them. This is what we have been using it into some of our, and we have been using, both using the app also we have tried to use it, and we have found out that people become more active, alert, and they are meaningfully engaged in several activities. So technology empowers the clinicians in order to transform us, but these are not a substitute for us, and we also have certain intervention programs which are available into Indian languages. We call as this cognitive linguistic interventions, which are more of behavioral based, not a technology based, but we have activity based. These are arranged in a hierarchy order, what we call as a CLIM. Okay, so it is available in Hindi, English, Malayalam and Tamil. So there are activities which we use, activities of daily living, recent immediate memory, naming, visual attention, perception, discrimination, temporal and spatial orientation, organization and categorizations, conceptual relationships and associations, problem solving and abstract reasoning, reading, writing, activities. So there are a whole lot of activities which are available which a clinician can carry out, as well as at home the caregivers can also carry out. You can also use technology. Sir, you have time?
No, time is already.
Time is okay. I'll just take 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. Okay. I was just saying VNest. You have heard it, but what I'm saying is you can deliver VNest using technology also. Okay. In telepractice mode, what you can do it. You just have to make a PPT. Nothing else you have to do it. Okay. So here what we were just saying, why we can use it. This yesterday has told about you, but you can have. It can help you into generalization also. But I can give you one example. Like it has got 4 steps, right? So we have said it, who does what, right? So you can have any one verb which you can use it, right? Who measures what? It's a simple task. These activities can be carried out in 40 minutes of session easily. Okay? But what happens is, you just have to carry out these activities, who measures what? Okay? Whether carpenter measures what, chef measures what, tailor measures what. Okay? This is step 1. In step 2, what you can do is, at least one personal response always I tell them, and I always ask. So let us say if a speech pathologist has got a dementia, okay, so what will be his personal activity? I have said it, chef measures what, tailor measures what, okay. So for a clinician like speech pathologist can also have dementia, right? Or we are prone. We don't have any connection with God, right? Okay. So if speech pathologist has got a dementia, what activities you can do is, what a speech pathologist measures? What do you measure?
Speech in English.
You measure what? In web when you do, you measure language, you measure aphasia quotient, right? You measure vital capacities, you measure fundamental frequencies. Audiologists will measure hearing, right? So please keep one personal activity for him, so you should know him that, okay? Then you can always ask him if he need to consolidate, he should be able to read these activities, okay? Read each sentence loudly. Okay, but if he is not able to read it, you can also go for a repetition task which we have been using in person who is not literate. You can always modify it. Okay, so carpenter measures wood, chef measures sugar, tailor measures cloth, speech pathologist measures vital capacity. Anything. Okay, but speech pathologist should not have stroke as well as dementia. We should not get it, right? So you can also expand the scenarios. Chef measures what? Okay, we can just put what, where he measures, why he measures, and when he measures. So you are expanding it. So you are broadening the linguistic variables. You can also put as judgmental skills, because this is a verification. Whether it is correct, incorrect agent, incorrect patient, or it is reversal. Okay? Tell me if it is correct. Chef measures sugar, correct, right? Doctor measures sugar, wrong? It is right. Dr. Major's blood sugar. You have to think possibility there because doctors will have stroke. They will have dementias because they will live longer, right? Chef Major's television, right? So what happens? You should see it in which context it is there, right? Sugar Major chef? No way, right? So can you recollect what we were talking? We were talking about which verb? You have dementia, short term. Which we were measuring verb, right? What happens? You are just asking. See, you guys only can't remember now. You should have hyper or hypoglycemia now, right? So you can always ask these questions also. I wish I would have told you. What I am trying to say is, you can use these techniques, and all of these dementia persons we called as VARK learning. Use visual, auditory, read and write, or the kinesthetic modalities which he or she is put in that. You can use PCA also, PCA which he has told, same things. I will not talk about PCA. Semantic features also he has talked about, so I will not repeat. But don't put this knife and all, right? Because someone will say, where do you use? You want to use it for killing also someone, right? Okay? Because you might create some goon also. Okay. There can be another task which we call as barrier task. Barrier task is nothing but the name is bigger, but I always say you guys play Uno, right? Yes. That same game is there. It's the same game, same activities. Right? That is a barrier for you, right? I am telling you in a very simple term. Like this can be there, some of these things. So what we are trying to say is, the interaction between technology based and other interventions, it has been related. So this was one thing which I was talking about. They have been saying rate of decline, disease modifies medication and technology based. So when you use only with the medication, okay, decline when you use technology as well as the medication, it will decline. But if you use without any treatment, there will be decline, there will be no improvement, or it will decline at a faster rate. The rate of decline with disease modifying medications will have a minimal impact. So what happened when you use technology with medication, with rehabilitation, the impact is much better. That's what they have been trying to say. So their mere use of technology environment is unlikely to cause clinical benefit of those technologies which are not used regularly or are used ineffectively. So select an appropriate technology taking into account the disease stage, preclinical as well as the psychological factor of the individuals. I was telling you why middle-aged people have more problems. Just 1 minute. Okay. What happens? You would have heard about this Maslow's model, right? When an older individual has got issues because he would have reached to self-actualization, means I've done everything in my life, right? People who are young at your age, they would have been there at physiological and safety needs, right? Young people, what they need money, right? You get money, your parents will have home, so you don't have to worry about, right? So you are at this stage, right? But people like me, they would have been got married by mistake, okay? Then have kids, okay? So what happens? We are at this stage. Self, love and belonging, means love and belonging because you get married. Esteem is there now, right? So now you are at a stage where you have kids who are going to school, who are going to college. But if a person has a dementia or a stroke at that age, his motivation level will be low. Because he was supposed to go here and he has come back here. But young people, they are here to here. And person who has reached to self-actualization, he said, had reached to the God once. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, if my kids are good, they will do well. If they are not good, they will be inside the well. It doesn't matter, right? So that is the main reason that it is a motivation which plays an important role. Okay, that's the main reason that why improvement is good in elderly as well as younger individuals than in the middle-aged. So, one size doesn't fit all. Please remember, it's all about personalizing technology-based intervention for person with dementias. Thank you.
Older people is going to increase, and due to other life expectancy also, our job is going to increase. Our SFP job is increased. Now we have autism problem because we all are busy in autism. Maybe in future we all will be busy.
Thank you so much to our speaker and chairperson for that thought-provoking and inspiring session on how technology can transform accessibility and care for individuals with dementia. Now I would like to request Mr. Kaviraj Khanal to present certificate to our speaker, Dr. S.P. Goswami. Miss Krishna Shrestha.
Her career working with children with cerebral palsy in India.
Just such a good array of speakers, lots of interesting things to listen to. I'm guessing you're just about full of information now. So you can sit back in your seats, don't talk as fast as some of our speakers. And I guess I have a bit of permission to do that because I've been there almost at the beginning. So thank you for inviting me to talk. It's great to be here, and it's so exciting actually when I think that I was one of 3 speech and language therapists, and I'm going to share with you today just how far speech and language therapy has come in Nepal, where we are today. We began as sole practitioners, often working in isolation. I certainly was. Resources restricted, impact limited. We all did our best, struggling with a very new profession in Nepal. And this conference really celebrates how far we've come, you've come. The greatest development probably being what we've been talking about so much in the last couple of days, multidisciplinary working. So yeah, that's where we're going. My name is Claire. As has already been said, kindly said, I'm a speech and language therapist. I qualified in London in the 80s, a long time ago, and I started my working life in India, South India. I went to South India and I worked in a school for children with cerebral palsy. It was an interesting school in that the children were taken away from their parents. It was a boarding school from the age of 5 actually, which troubled me somewhat. But in the school they had access to teachers and therapists, the whole plethora of therapists. So it's really multidisciplinary. And those children that were able went out to local state schools, mainstream schools. Others received their education in the school. I was the speech and language therapist. And it launched me into multidisciplinary working, and I'm very, very grateful for that. So, 4 years later, I arrived in Pokhara with my husband, where we were then to live for the next 6 years. And during that time, I worked as the third, if you like, registered speech and language therapist after Mr. Khanna and Mr. Let me get his name right, Mr. Kanal. They were both in Kathmandu, as we've been hearing about. I was in Pokhara, largely unaware of what they were doing. I just knew they were there, and I just knew that in Pokhara there wasn't anything. And I set about deciding what I was going to do about that. So, having done my level best with learning Nepali, I started by establishing a part-time speech and language therapy clinic in Western Regional Hospital. I figured that even with my rudimentary language, I had to be better than nothing, and there was nothing else outside of Kathmandu. The mainstay of my work was cleft palate, actually, because in the hospital at that time, there was a surgeon who was doing cleft repairs on a weekly basis. So huge numbers of children with repaired lips and palates. But my passion was really children with cerebral palsy. And so I got involved with a local Nepali NGO, a community-based rehab project, where we trained generic assistants to be both speech and language therapists, physio and OT assistants really. Gave them a core skill and knowledge, and then they could take those skills, those multidisciplinary skills, out to the villages and the homes of children with cerebral palsy. And that's a model that's been replicated many times over, and I'm sure that there are models of that happening in Nepal to this day. So I want to tell you about Purna. Purna had severe mixed cerebral palsy, including poor walking and sitting, and athetoid movements that affected all of her motor activity. Thankfully, her eating and drinking skills were just about adequate, certainly sufficient for nutrition and hydration. But she had severe dysarthria impacting on speech, such that at the age of 6, she had no functional communication. Interestingly, in the 6 years I worked in Pokhara at that time, I didn't come across any dysphagia. Now, I don't know why. I surmise that perhaps children with severe dysphagia at that time didn't survive, and they certainly weren't being brought in to Pokhara from the villages and the hills. Perhaps that was too big an ask. But that's just an interesting observation. I didn't do any dysphagia work at that time, and think how much dysphagia work we do with children and adults today. That's a big change. So Purna, let's go back to Purna, and that's not her real name, but it is a real child, lived in Nepalgunj, at that time a 12-hour journey away from Pokhara. Such was her mother's desperation for help, and having heard about me, she one day turned up at my clinic, having travelled on the overnight bus and needing to return home the next night. Not having known she was coming, I had just 1 hour to try and help Purna and her mum. Raise your hand if you're the only speech and language therapist where you work. Okay, so that's a big difference. I was on my own. I wasn't Nepali speaking, native Nepali speaking. I didn't have any colleagues to discuss her with, and I had 1 hour to try and make a difference. I'm actually going to ask you to turn to the person next to you and just for 2 minutes brainstorm what would you have done with Purna. Just talk among yourselves. There's no right answers, of course. As speech and language therapists, we are problem solvers, aren't we? We have to think on our feet. We have to look at what we've got, never mind what we haven't got, and we have to try and make a difference. So just talk to one another for a couple of minutes and discuss what would you have done with Purna, okay? To make a difference in that hour. Go for it. I'm not going to ask you to say what you said. Actually, the process was more important than the answers. I'm afraid for me, Purna wasn't a good news story. I'm sure you want to know what I did, and I honestly can't remember. But what I do vividly remember is that whatever I pulled out of the bag felt totally inadequate. That session left me with an awful feeling of helplessness, that Purna needed what I couldn't give, and that the long, costly return journey for her had almost been for nothing. What could I do without a physio colleague to help me with her seating and her athetoid movements? What could I do without that support? What could I do in a clinic far away from where she lived, from her context? What could I do to begin to understand her strengths and her weaknesses in terms of understanding and communication? What could I do in an hour to make a difference in terms of functional communication? What I regret most was just that that mother came with hope, and I'm pretty certain she left with that hope dashed. Actually. And I often think of Purna, and I wonder what became of her. She reminds me always that the most important element of what we do as speech and language therapists is to give dignity and to offer true and realistic hope to families. For hope is what draws us into the future. It enables us to struggle on, to believe in ourselves, to believe in our children, to believe in just small steps that we know will make a difference. So let's move forward 30 years to 2024. Again to Pokhara, this time to a young 7-year-old girl called Shristi. Again, that's not her real name. Shristi had severe quadriplegic cerebral palsy, spastic cerebral palsy. No ability to hold her head, limited ability to move her arms or legs, no ability to sit unaided, no communication skills beyond a cry or an occasional smile, and poor oromotor skills for eating and drinking, such that her health, her growth, her nutrition were all compromised. She also was having daily small seizures. I met Tristy because she had been invited to attend a Lily Cobra Guideship programme at INF Green Pastures Rehabilitation Hospital. I had returned to Nepal, Pokhara, for a couple of months, this was last year, and was invited to participate in the programme. I'm going to describe the programme so you get the context. The Lily Cobra Guideship programmes are residential group programmes which aim to cater to the holistic needs of a child and their family. Each programme offers individual, multidisciplinary assessment and planning, the provision of specialist seating or wheelchairs, psychosocial support for parents, and a context for parents to bond together, support one another, and benefit from the realisation that they're not alone, that other parents are out there and struggling too. Nutritional advice is offered, and consultations with the paediatrician are the bedrock of everything. And understanding how important play is for children, and this is the bit I really like about the programme is designed to help families spend time simply playing with their children, helping them bond in ways they didn't know was possible. To this end, the programme included not just play, but baking, cooking and an excursion. So Shristi attended with her mother, a young aunt, and a younger, very lively brother. The able-bodied siblings who are part of the child's context are welcomed to come as well. She was the most disabled of the children on her particular programme. And I think it's a tribute to her mum, to her courageous mum, that she came at all and that she came with hope. This time, her hope was rewarded. Sorry, I find it quite a moving thing, actually, just even thinking about it. So Shristi was immediately started on anti-epileptic medication that not only helped to reduce her seizures, but actually helped to reduce her drooling. She was assessed and measured for specialist seating so that she could ultimately be more upright and seated upright without her mother holding her the whole time, especially important for eating and drinking, as we all understand. She had sessions with a physio who showed her mum how to use massage and positioning to reduce some of the spasms, the painful spasms, and how to stretch her limbs out of their tight contractures. Once Tristy was comfortable, and only once, the SRTs started to look at her comprehension and explore what signals she was using to express pleasure and pain and enjoyment, to consider how those could be reinforced for intentional communication. More importantly, of course, we assessed her eating and drinking skills, discussed changes with her mum that might make things safer, quicker, and improve her nutrition. Throughout the week, I saw Shristi begin to look engaged, to watch the other children, and to allow her mother and other adults to support her in joining in sensory play. Her physical discomfort remained obvious. It's not easy, is it, to remove the pain of spasticity or to make mealtimes more pleasurable overnight when it's so difficult. And this story isn't a perfect one because, at the end of the week, she went home without her specialist seating because it wasn't ready. And that was so frustrating. But I do believe that she and her mum and her aunt and her little brother went home believing that there was something that could be done. There was something that was being done. And that Shristi had value, had been respected and loved. What more would we as parents want for our children? And her mother had made friends and had felt what it was like to support others as well as be supported. And there's dignity in that, isn't there? I'll never forget the excursion at the end of the week when Shristi and her mum, wearing beautiful matching outfits, proudly went on the excursion together. So that recent work with Shristi illustrates to my mind two significant changes that those early days when Perna turned up, since those early days when Perna turned up to see me in Pokhara. Remember Perna, but also remember Shristi, because what a change. SLT has moved out of the Kathmandu Valley. I know we've got a long way to go, because most of you are still in the Kathmandu Valley, but there is speech and language therapy, good provision of speech and language therapy outside of the Kathmandu Valley, and that's an enormous change. Just hands up, does anybody here work outside of the Kathmandu Valley? Yes, I applaud you. Okay, just out of curiosity as well, how many of you work at all, as part of your work, in a multidisciplinary team? Hands up. Some, not all. We've got a way to go still, haven't we? So I am going to talk a little bit more about other forms of multidisciplinary working, because it's got different names, hasn't it? We don't need to worry about the name, but there's lots of different ways that multidisciplinary working can happen. I've already alluded to three forms of that. The school in South India, a community-based rehabilitation project, and then the sort of programme that I've just described that happens in Pokhara. And I want to reinforce our understanding of different multidisciplinary approaches by adding a couple of other examples from my work in the UK. Multidisciplinary working generally happens when you are co-located in a place. Am I right? Lots of it happens in hospitals, in schools, sometimes in a clinic, but generally it works better with people who are living or staying in a place. Not so much for outpatients. It's more challenging with outpatients. The two multidisciplinary teams I'm going to describe involve outpatient clinics. And I was involved with both of these teams. The first one was a feeding clinic that consisted of a paediatrician, a dietitian of course, a physiotherapist, an occupational therapist, and myself. A child would be offered an appointment to come to see all of us together in one room, and that's significant. The aim was to look at seating first, because as a speech and language therapist, I didn't want to do anything until we'd optimise a child's seating. Then eating and drinking skills, obviously nutrition, hydration and constipation, and equipment, all with a view to improving the health, steady growth and enjoyment of mealtimes by both the child and the parents. And at the end of that session, the parent would take away one plan contributed to by all the different professionals. And then it would be reviewed again by all the professionals together. So one outpatient appointment, one plan. We were trying to reduce the number of clinic visits that the child had to make and to be more joined up with the way we worked. The other team was a therapy team in the community that was slightly different, and that obviously it was all about the child's overall development. And this was children with complex physical and learning needs. But it was also about professionals trying to work together in the same place and integrated in a way that they could. So referrals of children came into the team as a whole, and together we decided which of us needed to be involved in assessing the child. We would then bring the child into one room with all of us together. Sometimes if the child was shy, we used a two-way mirror, but we all watched together, and then we dipped in and out. The OT would do a bit of a sensory assessment. I'd do a bit of a comprehension and maybe an assessment of expression. The physios, of course, were looking at the development of physical skills, and a paediatrician was there as well, looking overall at the development. So we assessed them together, and again, at the end of that, we had one plan contributed by all of us. And then any future therapy invariably involved at least two of us together. We would either see the child at their home or in the clinic, but together. Often I did sessions with an occupational therapist. It often seemed to work that way for me. So, two different models of multidisciplinary working that I hope will just trigger your imagination wherever you are. Could I do something like that? Do I have a physio down the corridor or in the next clinic? Could we do, even just the two of us together, do something? Start small, but use your imaginations. So I started with the title words, where has SLT come from in Nepal and where is it today? I hope my stories of Purna and of Shristi have helped to answer those questions. The profession has come a huge way, and I'm sure you all have your own stories of good practice of children and adults touched by speech and language therapy services in your hospital or clinic or area. So services are no longer just SLTs working solely on their own. Where appropriate and possible, SLTs are collaborating with professionals for the benefit of clients. A Canadian academic, Javas Bush, not an SLT, but whose interest is in collaboration, defines partnership like this: a relationship in which both parties feel responsible for the success of whatever project or process or child or adult I'm putting in, they are jointly engaged. For me, that succinctly describes multidisciplinary teams at their best. Relationships of shared responsibility centred on the needs and circumstances of the child in front of us. Multidisciplinary working isn't easy. I don't want anyone to think that. I'm sure you know that. It involves a lot of skills. And I think we do well to consciously try and use those skills. They're skills that are really integral to being a speech and language therapist.
Excuse me, 2 more minutes.
2 minutes, okay. Things like listening and dialogue, self-awareness and humility, and generosity of our time. So we do well to intentionally acknowledge that we need those skills and use them as much as we can to make it as successful as possible. So, the obvious question is, where do we go now? Where does speech and language therapy go now? And other colleagues and speakers have had a few pointers in this, and I'm just going to add a few key questions. How do we keep the profession from being largely based in Kathmandu? I understand, I do, that you're more likely to earn your money in Kathmandu. That's the reality, isn't it? I get that. But you've been trained for Nepal, not just for Kathmandu. So I plead with you, have the courage to move out from Kathmandu when economics allows. Have the courage to be a bit of a pioneer and push out, because there are a lot of unreached adults and children with speech and language therapy services, particularly the really poor. And actually there are a lot of poor in our urban areas, and I suspect they're not necessarily being as reached as well, even in Kathmandu. So that's my first point. The other one, is CBR the best way of reaching out to adults and children in rural Nepal? And how much is it already happening in Nepal? What are the alternatives? I honestly think there's a good PhD in that if somebody was interested enough to look at it. And then, what's the best way to share, replicate and develop good practice? This conference, of course, is a wonderful way to do that. And the ongoing development of SLT training, that's going to be crucial too. But what other ideas? Has anybody thought of an online professional journal? I don't know. Is it out there already? That's a great way of sharing good practice and encouraging people who are working out in more remote places. In closing, I can happily report that that very tentative start 30 years ago, the Speech and Language Therapy Department in Western Regional Hospital has continued to this day. For many years, it was led by a series of Irish speech and language therapists, and Rosie Slater was one of those, and she really took the department from strength to strength, and some of you will remember her. And for a few years, more than a few, speech and language therapy assistant who had been trained by Rosie and others, continued the department on her own, and she is still there today. But for the past year, we have got your own Nepali speech and language therapist working at Western Regional Hospital who was trained here. I see that as testament to the vision and dedication of SLT professionals in Nepal over these decades. This alone suggests to me that the SLT profession and services in Nepal can have and will have a very meaningful future indeed. Thank you.
Beautiful captures of journey of speech language therapies in our country. Thank you.
Really have come a long way. Thank you so much. Now I would like to request Major Krishna ma'am to provide certificate to Ms. Clay.
Welcome everyone for the continuation of the session. For this, I would like to welcome Dr. Ambedkar Supreme, PhD, MA, SLP. He is Associate Professor, Department of Audiology and Speech and Language Pathology, SCT University, Gurgaon, Haryana. He is a speech language pathologist, audiologist, voice scientist with over 20 years of academic, clinical and research experience in India and USA. He holds PhD in voice science and has extensive expertise in dysphagia management, neurogenic communication disorders, pediatric speech language development, and acoustic profiling of speech and voice. Dr. Suprem has guided numerous postgraduate dissertations and published in Scopus Index Journal and presented at national conferences. He has served in leadership roles in curriculum development, clinical supervision, and interdisciplinary rehabilitation, promoting evidence-based practice in speech and hearing sciences. So now I would like to request him to continue with his presentation. Thank you.
And in nursing home facilities, you will come across a lot of patients with nasogastric tube.
That define us, but our resilience and enduring power of the human mind's
temperature and respiratory rate and pulse rate and the SpO2 level and all the information you have to gather it out, put it in. Then once you go to the patient, you just begin with bedside examination with oral examination, like just begin with the examination. Check the patient's alertness, whether the patient is oriented, if the patient is able to follow your verbal instructions, and check the patient's hearing, sensitivity, and vision, and all the things, gather the things. And if the patient is stable, alert, then you just move on to the tracheostomy. What type of tracheostomy tube has been placed? This tracheostomy tube has different types. Whether the cuff is present inside, or without cuff, or whether the tracheostomy tube has a fenestrated openings in or without fenestrated openings, or everything. All the information you have to gather. And oroperipheral mechanism examination, check whether the persons have any white patches in the mouth, because once we have the cuff type of tracheostomy tube, to overcome the aspiration, risk of aspiration, most of the time the nursing faculties, the doctors suggest to inflate the tube, to prevent the aspiration risk, okay? Because patient will not take anything by mouth, then why we are worrying about aspiration risk? But there is a risk because of the oral secretion, right? Persons get continuous oral secretion. But here, sometimes the persons might have a xerostomia because of once you inflate the cuff, the airway doesn't go in the normal way. It just go to the tracheostomy tube in and out. So the mechanism gets less of sensation. So they'll be having so much of dryness and so much of white patches. The white patches is nothing but it's a bacterial stuff, right? If that bacterial stuff, in case, if the person is having oral secretion along with the bacterial stuff, if it get aspirated, then it will be very problematic. The person will end up with aspiration pneumonitis. Got it? To prevent that, make sure SLV, once you do the examination, if you find like there's a lot of oral patches on the mouth, you call the station nurse and do the suctioning or some oral clean procedures. So once you clean up, the the orals and the white patches stuff out, then begin with, swallow examination. Swallow examination, that's an important thing, like we think of a lot of consistency. We use thin liquid, nectar thick liquid, honey thick liquid, pudding, mechanical soft, finely chopped and ground materials, and pureed texture and regular texture. We get sometimes we get confused, like which one we have to start first, which one we have to go last. And with my practical experiences, I don't begin with any pure trials initially. The thing is, oral secretion itself is a nectar thick liquid. Okay? You try to provide adequate oral hygiene tips, and once the oral hygiene tips is clear, then try to make a oral secretion by just stimulate the oral secretion inside. Sometimes the SLP will use the lemon swabs, some lemon swabs kind of things, and just put a lemon swab around it. So the persons get a oral secretion. That oral secretion asks the person to make a dry swallow. Okay. In dry swallow, the patient definitely have some problem with the laryngeal elevation because of the placement of tracheostomy tube. In some time, the tracheostomy tube sometimes is connected with the mechanical ventilator. Still, they will have some more problems on the laryngeal elevation. So they will have a premature spillage. So most of the time it causes aspiration, and that aspirated materials will not go down to the lungs. It stays just above the inflated cuff. Okay? So that the inflated cuff hold all the aspirated materials on top, because the tracheostomy tube has been placed just below the vocal cuff, isn't it? So make sure, like before deflating the cuff, you just do all the suction, you clear all the stuff above the cuff, then just provide all the textures, like whatever the texture. You go with the least dry texture. You start with the nectar thick liquid, and if the patient is not tolerating nectar thick, just move on to honey thick liquid and ask the person to make a lot of attempts. Once you do the trials, make sure like you have to provide compensatory approaches. Okay? It's not like once the patient is lying down on the bed, you cannot initiate any pure trials. Make sure that the patient is upright, right? So you provide some degree of chin tuck, so that you try to prevent the occurrence of aspiration risk. So provide and check all the things, whether the person is having any oral spillage or is there any oral residue in present. So this is the common issue we'll face when the patient is having tracheostomy tube, that is the impaired laryngeal elevation, and reduce the subglottal pressure. They cannot able to build up the subglottal pressure because of the tracheostomy tube placement, and desensitization of the larynx, and reduce the effectiveness of the cough reflex. They cannot get cough because the airway has been redirected from the tracheostomy tube. They cannot get the stream hit the vocal cord to have the cough reflex. The last one is the disruption of the vocal fold vibration. Yes, of course, when there is an inflation of the cuff, so there is no airway happens on the upper respiratory tract. So the person cannot have vocalization, they cannot cough, so cannot clear the throat. Okay, so everything will be difficult for them. So if you want to check all the things like cough and vocalization and everything, then you have to deflate the cuff. So as I said before, once you deflate the cuff, you have to make sure the aspirated materials, we don't know whether the aspirated materials are there or not. So make sure like do the suctioning before deflating, check all the vitals, then you work on it. This is the thing SLP will face. And in many conditions, like the patients with the tracheostomy tube, they will have the internal tube feeding also, because they have to, the tracheostomy tube has been placed because of the risk of aspiration. Okay, they will not have anything by mouth. So to prevent that, they will have internal feeding, either NG tube or the PEG, isn't it? So they will maintain adequate nutrition or hydration intake through that internal feeding. So the role, the challenging part of SLP is not only decannulating the tracheostomy tube. You have to work to get rid of that NG tube feeding us out. Okay? So the patient should be completely free from all the tube. So these are